Welcome to Cultivating Curiosity, where we get down and dirty with the experts on all the ways science and agriculture touch our lives, from what we eat to how we live. I'm Emily Davenport.
And I'm Jordan Powers, and we're from the University of Georgia's College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. In this episode, you're going to hear a new voice from a different Emily. Our colleague, Emily Cabrera, is guest co-hosting this episode.
Hey listeners, my name is Emily Cabrera. I'm a writer for CAES and UGA Extension, and I'm excited to be invited to co-host this episode.
We are recording this episode from our UGA Griffin campus, where we are here with Dan Suter, who holds the Orkin Professorship in Urban Entomology, as well as being our Extension entomologist, and Glen Ramsey, the Director of Rollins Entomology Department Technical Services. Dan and Glen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here as well.
As we kick off, we're talking about pests and pest control, and we know that you all have decades of experience between you. Tell us your best or maybe creepiest pest-related story.
Well, I started doing this in 1987, working with the pest control industry back in 87. There's so many stories because we do a lot of work in housing where we have extreme German cockroach problems. But I think my creepiest had to do with American cockroaches. When I was in school at the University of Florida, there was a sewage treatment plant on campus.
Oh, no.
And it was a 1950s era sewage treatment plant, and it was infested with American cockroaches. So we would go out there at nighttime. There had to be literally a million American cockroaches out there. And we would go out there and trap them and at nighttime fill up a 5-gallon bucket of American cockroaches and take them back to the lab. They were research insects that we would take back to the lab. Oh, you would gag. We would put these paint cans out and fill them up and then dump them into the 5-gallon bucket. By the end of the evening, we would have 5 gallons of American roaches. It was quite disgusting.
Yeah, we had a similar account that it was a high-rise building. Wasn't like family housing or anything. It was office buildings. But the basement floor of it had a sewer pit where all the sewage from the building ran in to go into the sewer of the city. And it had this metal cover over it. When you'd lift the cover, like it would just pour out American cockroaches. But mine, I would say that actually it isn't the worst. So the worst I would say is it was bed bugs infesting in a assisted living facility. And they were so bad that when you walked into the room, they were all up at the ceiling junction and stuff trying to hide. And they were so underfed that they would drop off the ceiling like onto your head. And
they smelled you.
They smelled us like the CO2 that we were releasing and breathing out and everything would alert them, and they would try and drop off for a meal. So that was pretty creepy. You did a little bit of checking before you went home. And
how many bugs do you think were in that place?
Oh, millions. I mean, there were probably thousands in each room.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah, some of the German cockroach places we'd go into, you'd open the cabinets and they would rain down onto you. Like you'd open a door and they were all around the door, the door jam, they just fall on you. The German cockroaches just rain down and you're brushing them off your jacket. And
this is where I wish people could see this recording session, because for our audience, Glen and Dan are like laughing and smiling and having this conversation. At the other end of the table, Em and I are like aghast.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
just an average day in the life.
It's just part of the job.
But those American roaches there's a smell about them.
Yep.
That is just, it's just so disgusting.
Roaches and rodents definitely have an odor. There's restaurants that we'll go into as a family and like, hey, let's try this new restaurant. And you walk in the front door and you're just like,
no.
And my wife just won't let me talk about the why. It's just like, I trust you. Let's go,
Okay, I do need to know, what does a cockroach smell like? How do you know what that scent is?
You can almost taste it too, can't you, Glenn?
Yeah.
It's a bitter. It's kind of a bitter.
Yeah, it's just when you come to learn. I mean, bed bugs have an odor.
Yes, they do.
That you can walk into a place, and I equate that almost to like a metallic, maybe the iron or something.
You can taste it, can't you? Yeah, it's almost like the iron because of the blood.
There's just something, and they have to be in, a massive quantity of really any of them to really get that odor. But, rodents, you're smelling the urine and the feces and stuff. That's a little more like what you would feel or smell in any other mammal. Right. When you start talking about like bed bugs and cockroaches and stuff, it's a different odor, but you learn it.
I have learned through the years when we go into a place and I sniff and we'll sit down. I'm like, I'm really uneasy about this. I start looking around. Typically, I don't see anything, but you know that there's something there that's just on the back of you're like, ugh.
This could be its whole own episode because now I want so much more detail.
Those are the two biggies, though. Roaches and bed bugs have got to take the cake in terms of gross.
And so this kind of gets into maybe what is urban entomology? We have insects everywhere, but what makes urban entomology its own area of expertise?
Well, that's a big question. So my own specific area of expertise is things that are associated with the house, right? So you could really extend that explanation or that definition of urban entomology into the yard, people that are in turf grass, pest control and ornamental pest control and things like that. But my expertise and Glen's expertise, more associated with things that are in the structure. So you're thinking about termites and bed bugs and cockroaches and creepy crawlies that are around the outside that might get in, like ants and things of that sort.
Yeah, I would say the same. The interesting thing, Dan's on the more the research, but applied as well from the extension side of what Dan does.
UGA Extension provides statewide outreach through CAES, the College of Family and Consumer Sciences, and Georgia 4-H, with a mission to translate the science of everyday living to foster healthy and prosperous communities.
In the business of, we get a lot of things lumped into urban entomology that aren't entomology, period. We get, like I said, rodents, wildlife, all this other stuff. I equate it back to, like, if nobody else wants to deal with it, it becomes like a pest control.
Those guys deal with
urban
cockroaches.
entomology.
They're surely fine with our squirrels.
Yeah, I mean, but it is. You have to get a little more rounded in what somebody might call about, because we cut down all the trees and put a house in it. So we're really moving into their neighborhood.
Well, and this is kind of interesting because what I'm hearing is, and it makes complete sense, but urban entomology, we call it urban and we think maybe it's just centered in this one place, but it really touches every single one of our lives. We all sleep in a bed. We all live in a house. We all go to hospitals and grocery stores and all around the world.
I want to take a quick step back, because we just dove straight into urban entomology, which is incredibly important. Can you give us the 15-second overview of the Rollins, Orkin, et cetera relationship and what that looks like?
Yeah, so Orkin is the first brand that the Rollins family acquired when they purchased that from the Orkin family in 1964. That relationship was actually very unique when the Rollins family was in all kinds of other stuff. Rollins Broadcasting, they did radio work, they did billboards, they did all this kind of stuff. And they kind of leveraged that. I use the term leveraged specifically because that purchase of Orkin by the Rollins family was the first leveraged buyout in history, where a smaller company buys a larger company and pays it off over time. That's still studied by like the Harvard Business School today as a leveraged buyout example. They then expanded into a lot of other things, from wall coverings to security systems. They really broadened their focus just from specifically pest control. And then chlordane was restricted by the US EPA. It pinched the business a little bit, so they divested a lot of the other stuff. It's kind of ironic. They kept the one that was being restricted the most because it was the one that had the best future out of all the other businesses. They actually voluntarily stopped using chlordane before the EPA took it from them, which I think is a noble act, because they went from something that was extremely inexpensive to use to things that were more expensive to use before they had to. So I think the family has made decisions over time to be as environmental as we can be.
According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, chlordane was used in the United States from 1948 to 1988 as a pesticide on agricultural crops, lawns, gardens, and homes. Because of concerns about damage to the environment and harm to human health, the EPA banned all uses of chlordane in 1983 except to control termites. And then, in 1988, it was banned entirely.
Then they decided that pest control was where they wanted to stay, and they started acquiring other pest control companies to put under the Rollins umbrella. There's several of them out there. There's several in the Atlanta area. There's several in the United States. I think there's 13 or 15 brands that fall under that Rollins umbrella. Orkin is like half of the company, though. They're a massive piece of what we do, and we're really proud of them.
Absolutely, as you should be. Just having that kind of inside glimpse that we're hoping to further show here. It's a really incredible thing and a really incredible partnership.
You mentioned that Rollins is sort of the larger umbrella and then Orkin is under that. Is Orkin just found in the U.S.? Where has Orkin branched out now?
Orkin is all over the world. It is a worldwide company. They franchise operations outside of the U.S. in a lot of the world. There are some company-owned operations. We have Orkin in Australia. We have Orkin in Canada. We have various other company-owned operations. And then we do have those franchises scattered out in 80, 90 countries around the world that still come in and do training, still work with the main company to do all of the education and everything to train their people. So we get that same level of consistent service around the world.
Glenn, can we talk a little bit about your role in entomology from the business side of things? And how did you transition from getting your master's to working for one of the largest pest control companies in the world?
I got into the business after my master's degree. I worked with Brian Forschler up at the University of Georgia and got my master's degree focusing in integrated pest management for subterranean termites. I had done a lot of work in Brian's lab with the industry. I had done some internships with the National Pest Management Association. I had met a lot of people in that area. It was a little bit of a dark time for finding a job when I got out. So there was like a year period after I got out where it was 2009 and it was kind of tough, but I was working on a family farm, raising some goats, and saw an advertisement for a bicycle ride, charity bike ride at a pest control company, and went out, rode, met one of the owners along the course, just struck up a conversation, and they said, I think we want to talk to you. They were more of like a medium-sized regional company. So we had a few interviews. We talked a lot. They had kind of been burned by an entomologist before. They couldn't relate to the technicians as well as they had hoped. They were just too technical. So we talked a lot. They felt comfortable with it. I took the job with them, obviously. The best thing they ever did for me is they put me in the field and I ran a route. I dug termite trenches like I did back in college and dealt with customers, resolving customer complaints. I worked on the sales side. They just put me through the paces of the everyday life of a technician. It was the most valuable thing that I've ever done because now I can relate to what it's like to run a route, what it's like to do this, what it takes to make that life easier for the technician. And that's what I feel my role is at Rollins now, is to make the life of the technician easier every day.
I'm nodding because even though I have this much experience with the pest control industry, that's what I hear time and time again with UGA Cooperative Extension is the agents that come up that they've done the work as an agent and then they move up within the extension in whatever direction they take it, because extension can go so many ways. It's a very similar thing that you gain this understanding that you can't get in any other way, which is awesome to hear that that's also translating to industry.
It's really important that you be able to walk in somebody's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my students that if they're contemplating going into the industry, I said, you need to be the first one in the crawl space with the light. You need to lead the charge in that crawl space and don't be afraid to get dirty because it lends credibility. When you're talking to people, you've got to have walked in their shoes.
And I would say if there is an entomology student and listening, hope there is, that is going to transition into the industry, almost demand it when you take the job. Don't feel like you want to go straight into teaching or, IDing bugs or whatever. Go get dirty, as Dan said. You get a lot of respect from the others when you get in the crawl space first with the light, find the mummified dog or whatever you find down there.
And that's another whole separate episode.
Well, Dan, thinking now also about your career and academic journey, can you kind of give us an overview of, take us back in time and bring us to present?
Yeah. I grew up in Florida. I grew up in West Palm Beach. Went to a small junior college down there. It's a sizable junior college now, Palm Beach Junior College. And I knew I wanted to study biology. I grew up as one of those kids in South Florida, fishing and hunting with my dad and my brother. So you just gain an interest in the little things. And I was one of those kids that we would be in the woods and you would always kick over the log. And my dad was hunting and I was looking at stuff in the logs. You just don't grow out of that, I guess, what an entomologist is. I took all the biology courses I could at this junior college. And this is the influence of a teacher. So I went to a teacher. She was retired from Duke. She was teaching a course in invertebrate biology at the time. I said, I don't know what to do with a degree in biology. So she said, there's this field called entomology. And I remember spelling that in a spelling bee in high school one time, but I didn't know what entomology was. She said, this school right up the road, University of Florida, has a great program. You need to look into it. This is one conversation. That's why I'm sitting here today, is that one conversation with that teacher. I got the catalog and looked at all the prerequisites. I took all those prerequisites at this school and then transferred to the University of Florida. Got a BS, a master's, and a PhD in Gainesville. I was there 9 years. Left there, went to Purdue for 5 years, and then came to UGA in 2000. I've been here 24 years. But I tell this story all the time. Teachers have really huge influence on people. It's just one conversation can influence somebody's life.
I would say mine was maybe even similar. It was not as direct as that, but I was studying to be a pediatrician and took Insects and Man with Carl Espeley.
No kidding. See?
And, I had a pet scorpion when I was little. I found it in the garage,
Yeah.
and I'm like, look, I put it in a fishbowl, that type thing, but never knew what entomology was.
Yeah.
And I took that entomology class with Dr. Espeley. And this is a, 350 person lecture hall where basically he showed videos all day and, he took a test every couple weeks. But I was just like, you mean people get paid to do this?
That's really cool stuff.
That's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it came easy to me. And I literally, like halfway through the semester, walked down to the entomology office and changed my major.
Wow.
Wow.
It was a completely different college. There were different requirements. I lost some credits, and the call home to my mom didn't go as I had planned,
Yeah.
You're not
Mom, I'm going to study bugs.
She's much happier now, but it was really that passion that Carl Espeley put into that class that made me realize that it was something that you could be passionate about, you could enjoy your job and play with bugs and stuff like that.
It's not hard to find an entomologist with that story, Glenn.
Yeah.
You go to the entomology department now, and professors that are there will have a similar story. I was studying, I didn't know what to do. I took a course in general entomology, and I was hooked.
Yep.
And it changed the direction of their life.
We say the same thing about the pest control industry.
Yeah.
People will take a job in the pest control industry. They're like, well, I'll do this until I find something better.
That's right.
And 36 years later, they retire.
They put three kids through college.
Yeah.
And
it's a sticky industry.
Yeah.
People fall in love with it. They fall in love with the people interactions. They fall in love with what they're doing. And
it's different.
it is a different.
Every day is different.
Yeah. It's just a neat job.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are days where I go back and I'm like, I don't have a master's yet. Do I need to go back to entomology?
Yes.
You would love it.
Things to think about. Well, we know that last year Orkin partnered with CAES to develop an endowed professorship in urban entomology. I will be sure to link to the story in the show notes for that. But the relationship between the two of you and between the two organizations has developed over many years. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this partnership and how it came to be what it is today?
The Rollins family has had a connection with the University of Georgia for decades.
Yeah.
They have provided some funding to the urban entomology program at UGA campus in Athens for at least a couple of decades. The connection with UGA is strong. It's right down the street from us, either direction. We're like a little over an hour, and we're at the Griffin campus or the Athens campus. Dan and I go back to Dan being on my committee when I was getting my master's degree.
That was a few years ago.
Wow.
That has been a couple of years, hasn't it? But, this urban field in general is smaller than it should be, but we all kind of know each other. And a previous president of Orkin, Freeman Elliott, sits on a group at UGA up in the College of Ag. He's on the
Dean's Advisory Committee.
I knew you could fill in some information there. And he's a UGA grad, a UGA fan, and wanted to try and establish something to make it a more permanent, lasting thing.
Yeah. The idea for that endowment has been kicked around for probably a decade. The partnership has been strong for multiple decades. It's just we swim in the same pool. Me and Brian Forsler and other urban entomologists, we all attend the same meetings. We see Glen and we're catching up, and it's just a logical partnership. Really, the endowment formalized it.
I think it's wonderful. Like I said, we've worked with Dan, we've worked with Brian for all of these years, and it's nice to have almost the recognition in the industry that Orkin and UGA are partnered together formally that may not have even been known. Because, I'm a little biased having a degree from UGA entomology, but I think it's one of the best programs in the country. It's, I'd say it's a top 5 at least. And to attach our name to that formally, I think is amazing for both of us.
So I've kind of got a double-barreled question. We've touched a little bit on it, but how does the industry benefit specifically from this partnership? And how does the public benefit? Is that what this partnership ultimately is hoping to serve?
It's a fairly new endowment, but we've utilized the relationship for many years. We have a great team of entomologists at Rollins and Orkin and all this, but there's every once in a while there's like, hey, we aren't really sure what this larval insect is or whatever, and we'll send it to Dan or to Lisa or whoever down here in Griffin and get a second opinion. We've utilized the resources that this extension office has provided with insect ID guides for homeowners, for out of UGA termites and structures and all all of this, we've utilized that to even hand out to customers. We've used it internally to help train our people. And we have a lot of plans to continue that, have Dan on our podcast sometime and, all of these things. So the benefit, there may be some trickle down. We utilize more of it probably internally, but then it gets to our people who then use that information to benefit their customers.
Academia provides a different perspective on things, right? You're in more the pragmatic perspective on things. And so we'll bounce ideas off of each other on a particular technique. And I have access to the peer-reviewed literature, can go to the literature and look at what that says. And having spent a life of 40 years in academia, I'm kind of in tune with that kind of thing. So if I don't know the answer, I know where to go to get that answer. And it's more of a technical answers to questions that might arise from the technical team.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits of Dan specifically is that because he has this whole side of extension in his career, he has the ability to communicate with us in a way that our people can understand. And it's a unique talent. Not all academics have it. But, the ability to write in a way that our technicians would understand. We've had him on what we call Tech Topics, which are continuing education broadcasts. We've had Dan participate in those. So in that, he's speaking directly to our employees. It's always well received because of that unique ability that Dan has.
It's critical to be able to communicate with people.
Yeah.
That's what extension's all about, right? So
yeah.
You have to be able to take highly technical information and communicate it to people that they can take something away from. That's what extension's about.
The number of times, Em and I, our whole roles are about that, right? Talking to our researchers and breaking it down for a general audience. And the number of times I've had to say during an interview, talk to me like you're talking to your aunt at Thanksgiving. Like you need to break it down for us. This is a perfect segue into the next question. There's so many benefits to the industry and then trickling down to the general public. But Dan, what does this partnership do for your program in urban entomology, for your students and for UGA Cooperative Extension, like we were just talking about?
The mother's milk of academia is money, right? You've got to raise the money for graduate students. Some of the listeners may not know that when you have a graduate student means that you're pursuing a degree past the bachelor's degree, past a 4-year degree. So you go on to get a master's degree or a PhD. When you do that, you're becoming really specialized and you pay that student. Graduate students in the College of Agriculture are on what's called an assistantship. And so the professor has to come up with funding to pay that individual student, and you got to raise that money. So this endowment will allow me to fund a graduate student or two, and in consultation with the technical team and Glen and others, address needs that Orkin and their technical team might have to solve problems that would benefit everybody, the student, myself, and the technical team. So it's highly beneficial to graduate education.
I'd even add that having, in essence, a lab. We're the entomologists that support the organization, but we don't have all the time that we would like to be able to sit down and say, well, what if we tried this on Argentine ants? Number one, we'd have to go find Argentine ants. Number two, we'd have to set up some kind of trial. And this relationship allows us to say, number one, Dan, have you already done that? Because, he might have. Number two, it's not a major project, that would take multiple years or something. Hey, Dan, don't you have some Argentine ants down there on campus? Could you try this on them? And that relationship, we can usually get data, more scientific data than us trying to utilize our people internally, that their job is really to service people's homes. We want to protect their homes, but we also want to do this research. So now we have this way to do that.
It seems like a really organic way of continuing to push and stay on the cutting edge of research, is to have this partnership. So thinking about that, staying right at the cutting edge of what is the next question? What is the next research question? What is the future of urban entomology? What is that next thing that is the most pressing in entomology and specifically urban entomology?
Yeah, we're looking like, what's it going to be like in 5 years? What's it going to be like in 10 years? And this relationship does help us try to address that.
The relationship is more, and the needs are more pragmatic. There's fundamental research that is incredibly important in understanding systems, but this relationship is more of an applied nature, I think. Immediate answers to questions that they might have, the technical team might have. Most of the endowments are not in that vein. This is the first extension endowment that I'm aware of. At least it definitely is in urban entomology. I have a 90% extension appointment. All the other endowments are research-based endowments. And that research is incredibly important from a long-term perspective, and again, in understanding systems. But this is more the pragmatic side, I think.
We call it ready to use.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
truly,
like you don't have to let it percolate. You don't have to mix it. You don't have to do whatever. You can just apply it. And it's that ready to use research that we really need now of, hey, we've got this invasive pest. What can we do about it? And this is that type of relationship.
And it's not just the technical team. There are others within Rollins that we work with as well, to open their eyes to other areas of entomology that they may not have thought of, that we're aware of on the academic side. Maybe we see new pests coming, that kind of thing, that are a little bit different and maybe not applicable to the technical side, but might be important for others to learn about.
We've covered a lot of bases of the partnership, of the industry, of the research. If you could each leave our audience with one pest control related takeaway, what would it be? Big questions at the end.
Wow. One pest control related takeaway. I don't have any problem with somebody trying to take care of something small by themselves, but be aware that things can get out of hand and they can balloon into something that you can't handle. And we're happy to handle anything from the smallest to the largest. The challenge comes in is that there are some things that people can do that make our job harder. Applying something that may scatter ants all over your house because you read something online that can make the job harder. So I would say if you're having any kind of pest issue, ask for somebody to come out and take a look at it, because it may be something that's not going to be expensive to fix. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to buy all the stuff to control it. We already have all that stuff, and it will be cheaper than if you try and do something and then it gets worse. Typically, inspections are free across our industry. I mean, whoever you call will typically come out and take a look and give you some advice, and you can take it or leave it at that point, make your own decision. But I would say don't hesitate to call somebody out to take a look, get a professional opinion, and get some advice before you try and make a mistake on your own.
We must be sharing a mind meld here, because that was my exact thought, is that, when you do something day in and day out, you get better at it.
Yeah.
If you're doing something, that's your job. People who don't do that typically hire people who do that, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. And it's the same in pest control. You can try to do things yourself, but there's a reason why you hire people, is because they're trained to do it. They're licensed and they're better at it. You're right. There are some things you could try to do yourself, but there are two things that I tell county agents, I tell homeowners, never, ever try to do yourself. And it's termites and bed bugs.
Absolutely.
You can call me now or you can call me later. And that's specifically for bed bugs. And I have found, I get this call all the time of people who found they have bed bugs in their house, and I'm going to solve this myself because I'm embarrassed by it, or whatever the reason. And 4 months later, the problem is raging, and it's expensive now to get rid of. It's hard to get rid of, when if they had acted and called somebody prior to that, they could have solved the problem.
Bed bugs and termites are like bad news.
Yeah.
In one way, they're bad news because you have them, but in the second, they don't get any better the longer you wait. Take care of that bad news right away, and stop it early.
Yeah.
Well, especially in hearing this partnership and the research and the information that's being shared back and forth, just have the experts help you right away.
That's right.
is my takeaway. That's been my takeaway since I moved to Georgia, especially because the pests down here they're next level bad news. And I'm immediately like, nope, it's out of my league. I can't do it. Dan, Glenn, thank you both so much. We know you are both very busy traveling all over, and we very much appreciate you all taking the time to come in and talk to us today.
Wonderful to be here.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Cultivating Curiosity, a podcast produced by the UGA College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. A special thanks to Mason McClintock for our music and sound effects. Find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts.